Hey everyone, this is Eric Huey, host of the GenWhy Leaders Podcast, where we interview and learn from millennials who are leaders in their fields. These are individuals who have started their own businesses, have a high-ranking title within companies, or are simply pursuing non-traditional means to support themselves and their families. You know, there still exists this negative stigma around our generation as being entitled, lazy, and unreliable. So my goal is to prove that wrong, while also helping millennials become the best version of themselves and go after their big goals. On this episode of the GenWhy Leaders Podcast, we'll hear from entrepreneur Ryan Bennett about the importance of self-awareness. This episode is not simply about learning whether you are an introvert or an extrovert. It's about knowing your strengths, applying them with your knowledge, and creating habits that allow you to focus and improve upon them. Listen in to Ryan's journey of becoming more self-aware as he tells us about the mentors and systems that had a positive influence on him, such as StrenghtFinders and the ARTT method. Previously thinking he wanted to be a CEO of a large corporation, Ryan tells us how better understanding his strengths has guided him to what he was born to do, help empower others. I hope this podcast does exactly that for you listeners. Here's my interview with Ryan Bennett. I usually start off every episode just kind of general overview, who you are and what you do.
Okay. So for the last 10 years, I basically ran startups. My latest one that I've been with for 7 years is called IdleSmart. We just raised and closed a Series A round of financing, so that's going to set us up for some growth of the next 3 to 5 years. So that was exciting to do.
Yeah, definitely. Congrats on that.
Yeah, thank you. And so, part of that story and my story, and I think why you're talking to me about self-awareness, is during that 7-year journey with IdleSmart. Over the past 3 years, I really got in contact with some really good mentors and really smart people in my life who started the journey of me to be more self-aware and to understand that I wasn't at where I wanted to be, and I wasn't good enough for the life I wanted to have. And those questions sort of led me down this journey of personal and professional development. And over those 3 years, the last 3 years, I started learning more about myself and started leading myself well. And then people started coming to me wanting to have coffee and start to learn from me. And so then I started for more formal mentoring and coaching, and then I developed the 6-week intentional leadership program, and then I did a package with Northwestern Mutual and did StrengthFinders with Chick-fil-A at their franchise office and did some other side gigs, and it sort of ignited the passion in me to do leadership development and leading, developing, encouraging people. And so that's sort of where my passion is right now. And as I transition to full-time there, I'm sort of leaving IdleSmart behind in good hands and transitioning to full-time doing leadership development.
Definitely. You're a passionate guy, and you're smart with it too. And I know I've come to you for help myself in the area of self-awareness, and we'll get into StrengthFinders, but you also do strength-based leadership.
Yeah, I love strength-based leadership.
And that's a cool program. So much I want to talk to you about, but yeah, today is definitely going to be focused on the topic of self-awareness for the most part. Another lead-in that we usually do on the show, such as called the GenWhy Leaders Podcast, WHY. I like to ask, what is your why? What keeps you motivated and excelling and accomplishing the big goals that you have in mind?
Yeah, so part of this journey was figuring out my why. And my why is to lead, develop, and encourage people. And I first have to look at myself and how do I lead myself well, and how do I develop myself, and then I look for opportunities to lead and develop other people, and I can see, I look for those opportunities, I seek those out. But part of that journey I had is discovering what my why is and what my definition of success was. Before, when I was a little younger, I wanted to be that CEO. I wanted to be the guy running this multi-million-dollar business, and all the things come with it. And as I learned more about life and myself, in my faith, I realized how wrong that was for me. And my why has changed. Now my why is to empower people to be the best versions of themselves, to lead and develop and encourage them.
That's awesome. Great vision. So again, topic's going to be self-awareness. And that I want to start with this, and that's self-awareness is such a broad topic that I feel like it could be interpreted in a lot of different ways. So let's touch on maybe what you interpret self-awareness to be. Maybe, I don't know if you have a broad definition, or just talk a little bit about that, because I think a lot of people view it as I'm an extrovert or I'm an introvert, and just kind of more so high-level labels, not really knowing at a tactful level their skills and their talents that they can apply in personal relationships or in the workforce?
Yeah, I think self-awareness is very broad. Where I think of self-awareness for myself is on the personal development side, and how I relate to the world, how I communicate with people, and how I can have empathy for people and read situations better. And so when I think of self-awareness, one of the tactics I try to use is from a mentor of mine named Les Waller, and it's called the ARTT method. And it stands for aware, reflect, target, and try. And what he teaches and what I've sort of love about this is that you can learn all you can about yourself, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, or how your strengths are wired as well. Like StrenghtFinders, all this stuff goes into it. You can learn as much as you want, but until stress is applied to the situation,
that's a great point.
Nothing's going to happen. It's all just book knowledge. Mm-hmm. But when stress is applied to the situation, people either thrive or crumble. And Les was a part of the Navy, and he got to coach some of the Navy SEALs and help with their training.
Wow.
Not as a Navy SEAL, but as a leadership development guy in the Navy. And sort of came up with this tactic from the Navy SEALs, which is basically let's apply a lot of stress to environments. And so then let's learn what happened, and then find ways to correct it. And so I'm going to tie that back to his method, ARTT. So awareness is the first piece. So aware of what happened in the situation when stress was applied. You had a weird conversation with your boss or your spouse. Wait a minute, something's off there. What was that? So being aware that you had that conversation, and then spend some time reflecting on what happened. What was the vision? What was the reaction when I said this? What words were used? I try to picture myself as like in a camera in a corner, like up in the top corner, and watching the interaction happen, watching me in the interaction like I'm watching film. If I was an athlete, you watch film in the game.
Right.
So I try to do that. And then it's amazing what happens on there, because you can actually pick up what you did wrong. And then all of a sudden say, okay, now I know what I did wrong. Next time, what will I do differently?
Nice.
Okay, now I have a plan of action, and then now you go seek out a situation where the stress is applied again, and you correct it, and you keep on going. So that's sort of how I think about self-awareness, is situations like that happen. And for me personally, like I thought they would happen way more in business, but they actually happen a lot more with my wife and I, and me just being a terrible listener and trying to get better on that situation.
Perhaps the best place to be self-aware is in your marriage. So
yeah, there's no line that separates business and personal there on that one.
All right, so kudos to you for being self-aware in your marriage. And I don't mean to get off on a side tangent right from the get-go, but that's a good point that you bring up, and one that I want to touch on in these interviews on this podcast is, those people who are driving to be successful, there's a lot of time commitment away from your spouse or your significant other. So how do you apply that in your relationship with your wife, and how do you get her and how do you communicate that mutual understanding of that you're going to be going after these goals, and that's where a lot of your time is going to be, with the balance of also being a good husband?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I'm 4 months into my marriage, so maybe you're a better guy to ask.
You are a pro.
I'm a pro by
4
now.
months.
Yeah. So maybe you're a better person to ask about the marriage side. It's hard to give me too much advice. But when I was struggling with my time management, I loved. There's a different methods you can use for time management skills. There's sort of tactics, but the philosophy I love was John Wooden, and I love John Wooden. I love his teaching. He was the UCLA basketball coach, won 10 national championships in 12 years, and never talked ever about winning the game. He talked about performing the best you could possibly perform on that day. And
Wow.
the score, if you won or lost, did you perform the best you could? Were they actually just more talented than you, and that's okay? Or did you play down a level one, but you could have played better?
Right.
And so for him, when he graduated high school, his dad gave him a card, and it was a core values card that he held, and he made all his decisions based on the core values card. And that resonated with me. And so I sort of started practicing this and created this core values card I carry in my wallet to this day.
I was going to say, I remember this is coming back to me. I remember you talking about this now, and keep it in your wallet.
And so I filter out the decisions I need to make based on my core values. And so I do the right things for the right reasons, what my wife and I talk about. And then we filter out the decisions based on where do they fit in the core values. And if they don't fit in the top 7, then it's like, okay, this is a little bit of margin time. Is this good? Is this bad? Is this okay? Am I taking away from my wife's time? Or is this carved out specifically for like margin time?
Yeah.
I'm
That's
probably
awesome.
more rigid than the average person. It's sort of how I'm wired.
No,
that works for me.
That makes sense, because it's almost like, to me, it sounds like what I'm hearing. It's like you're almost keeping a roadmap in your pocket. And any time it's like, okay, well, a new opportunity, where's the roadmap lead us? But you created the roadmap, so it's essentially you're setting yourself up for success, and self-aware with your time nonetheless, of where to spend it, where you're going to get your outcomes, for where you want to invest the most.
Yeah, it's funny. In my wallet, my emotional intelligence is not as high as I want it to be, and so I keep the emotional intelligence card as well.
Nice.
So I'm feeling feelings I don't know and I can't put words to. I'll stop and pause, bring out the emotional intelligence card, pinpoint the feeling, then try to dig in why I'm feeling that way. So that's another tactic I use that's in my wallet, because I can't, I'm just not good at
this. That's a huge point, though, because as we just the word alone, self-awareness, it's all internal reflection, but I think a huge component of it, almost the biggest component, is how you apply that to how you were working with others. So I guess let's get into that a little bit, and maybe talk a little bit about our generation, why it's important for them to be self-aware in their own relationships in the workplace, and then maybe some resources that they could get into. Of course, we've talked about StrengthFinders, and that's, I think, where we should keep the focus today. Maybe on another episode, I'll have you back and we can talk about emotional intelligence or strength-based leadership, or, things like that. But for now, maybe let's stay focused on StrengthFinders and talk about how it's benefited you, and how it can benefit others.
Yeah, so I love StrengthFinders, and for people who don't know what it is, very briefly, the idea of strengths is that there's 34 natural talents people are born with, and you can have some that you're naturally gifted at and some you're not. And the idea is, instead of focusing on what you're not good at and trying to make it better, because at best you'll be probably average at that, focus on what you're naturally gifted to do. And then focus all your attention on becoming the best at that. You'll be more energized, you'll be more fulfilled, and you'll be way better at what you do in career and in your life. And that resonated with me because it's basically doubling down on what you're already good at and being the best at it. So that's what StrengthFinders is, and why I love it is, for me, part of this journey, you asked me what my why is I had the opportunity to sit with a life coach who was awesome, Joe Calhoun, and we did our strengths, and he sort of looked at me and told me I don't have the strengths to be a CEO. And my first reaction was I was mad at him.
Yeah, I bet. I think that's a normal response.
Him wrong, and I wanted to fight and prove him wrong. And it took me 5 to 6 months of reflection and time, and to realize that this is actually not how I'm wired.
Yeah.
No matter how much I want it to be different, I'm sort of fighting my natural talents and strengths. Right. And instead of fighting it, why don't I focus on what I'm actually wired to do really, really well, and then just become the best at that.
Yeah.
And that was part of this journey, and that's what I love StrengthFinders, because when people have that impact moment of I can encourage them and speak into them, and when they understand how they're wired and why they perform the way they do on certain things, it's the light bulb moment happens, and it's exciting for me.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's awesome. Did you have your map in your wallet at that point to take out after he told you that you're not going to be CEO?
I did not. I did not. I definitely needed it. It took me about 5 months to figure out what I actually was feeling.
Right. Yeah, that's completely understandable. I think anyone, including myself, in that situation would definitely be mad at someone who would essentially shoot down what they thought were their dreams at the current moment.
And this is why Joe Calhoun was a great coach, because he speaks
honest.
Truth in there,
yeah.
And he did it in a nice, respectful, great way.
Yeah.
I didn't receive it well, but that's on me. That's not on him. He did a great job explaining why, and did it nicely, and being a fantastic coach to speak that into me. Because if he didn't say that, my head would be in the clouds, saying I'm still going to be this great CEO,
right?
And I'm not,
yeah,
and that's okay.
Yeah. So next, I want to talk about how you took that experience and have continued to develop or double down, as you said, on those new strengths and kind of where it's led you to now. But before that, there's a lot of talent or strength, what do I call them? Personality assessments, I guess, out there. And I just want to touch on this real quick. And I don't work for StrengthFinders or anything. I'm not trying to plug it. I do think it's probably the best out there for personality assessment. I know there's things out there like Enneagram, different stuff like that. But to me, that's just confusing because, as we talked about earlier just a few minutes ago, the whole point of self-awareness is to be able to apply it outward. And so things like Enneagram, if I'm going around, there's 3 people in an office or in a cubicle standing around talking, and 2 of them say, well, I'm a I-95 with a wing, or, I'm a maverick cowboy, if, some other type of personality assessment, then the person who's kind of left out doesn't really get that. Like, you can't communicate that. It's like right from the get-go you have conflict. So I like StrengthFinders because it's at least the high-level labels. Your top 5 strengths are commonly used terms and language. I mean, you might have to dive a little deeper into what they mean, but for the most part, it's like, okay, well, I have high empathy, or I'm a positive person. That from the get-go, you can more clearly communicate to people that you're working with or in relationships with.
Yeah, and there's 4 main themes. So you can be an executor, an influencer, relation building, or strategic thinker. So people sort of know those words, and you can explain more about it, but I tend to StrengthFinders because it's what had the most impact with me and what I'm most comfortable with. I think coaches or whatever they're most comfortable with can have the biggest impact on whatever tools they have, which is great for me. I lead to StrengthFinders, and I love strength-based leadership as well. And that's basically using your strengths to lead others well. Right. And that's sort of what I'm all about. So.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited to have you back one day and touch more into that. But going back to my earlier point, can you talk a little bit about how you that pivot moment with Joe Calhoun where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be a CEO. Like, where am I going to go? And you said you had that 6-month period where you're just down and like how to analyze your feelings. Talk a little bit about coming out of that and kind of reframing your thoughts and your path, so to speak, of where you wanted to go and to how it's led you to where you are now.
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's so much intertwined with that journey for me, including like some faith journey and some other stuff going on. And so for me, though, when I stopped trying to fight it and I started to embrace it, then things started to change for me. And what I mean by that is understand how I'm wired, understand what takes me into my quote basement, and then starting to put the tactical things in my life. And so when I talked about the ARTT method, right, it's that bridge to change. Like with stress, I crumbled before. Now with stress, I was aware, okay, wait a minute. If I'm in the middle of a task and I have a time limit on it, then I need to be by myself. I can't get taken off. It distracts me. It makes me upset. I'm not my best, right? So that's just one little tiny example. But to get back to your question, so part of that journey for me was understanding these things and then realizing, okay, wait a minute, I can apply these to my everyday life.
Right.
And then as part of that, then I started like telling everybody about it because look what it did for me. It was awesome. It was great. And then people wanted to start meeting. And then they said, well, can you help me through this? And I'm like, well, I guess I can. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so I got some training cards and I started helping people through. And, I've probably done over 100 now with people.
That's amazing.
Yeah, over the 3 years. And it's just because I did it for myself.
Yeah.
And it had the impact, or people did it for me. They helped me out, and
right.
I got to do it for other people now. And so that is sort of what led me into the coaching leadership development is actually StrengthFinders of like people coming to me and say, well, can you help me like you helped yourself? And I was like, well, yeah, let's go do this. Or like Joe Calhoun helped me. I'm sorry, I keep on saying myself.
Yeah, you're right.
I did not do it by myself.
No one ever does. It always takes help from other people. Talk a little bit about kind of that segment between knowing and reflection. You talk about the ARTT method, and the reflect point has me intrigued for sure. So I interpret that as standing guard at the doorway of your heart and mind, right? So knowing this on paper and taking the test and the assessment is one thing, but to catch yourself saying something or catch yourself acting one way is a whole nother. And another part is that, reverting or reflecting backward from that or adjusting it more so to improve upon it. So what's advice that you would give to someone who's trying to better reflect, I guess?
So I'll give you the tactics, but let me tell you a story why it's important to me and why this really hit me home.
Yeah, please do.
So I'm fresh into a marriage. And
congrats.
I remember, thank you.
She's a lucky gal.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'm the lucky one, but I'll take it. I remember distinctly we were eating at Chewy's, and I had fajitas, and Chewy's is amazing. And
great place.
Fajitas are great.
Pretty much drank that sauce.
Yeah, and I was just scarfing down food. I was hungry, and I was just eating and happy. And I remember my wife started talking to me, and then all of a sudden, like she started getting serious and like sharing her heart, something that was very vulnerable for her. and very scary for her to share. And she's like, you could tell it was weighing on her, and she was like sharing it. And I now reflected on that moment, but in that moment, I just kept on eating Chewies and like, oh, that's great, babe. Like, that's awesome. We'll get through this or whatever.
Can you pass more salsa, please?
Yeah, get more salsa, more chips here. And I remember eating, and then that night, 'cause I try to do it every night before I go to bed, I reflect on that conversation. I missed something, right? So I was aware I missed something. I didn't know what it was, and so I reflect on the conversation, and I realized that my wife was sharing her heart to me and being very vulnerable and open, and I brushed her off. And it's like, wow, the woman I love the most, I brushed off. I didn't even listen to her, and I wasn't empathetic.
Yeah.
And I didn't really hear her.
Yeah.
And so that is the reflection part. And so then now we go into, okay, target and try and the tactics around it. And so I knew that I needed to make an adjustment. And these are the tactics. I'm getting the tactics section now. So I knew that, okay, I made the mistake, so I need to go apologize. And so I went the next morning, I apologized, and I said, hey, last night at Chewy's, I completely missed the conversation. I wasn't listening well, and I know you were sharing your heart now. But I just want you to know, like, that I heard you, and we talked about it a little bit, and that moment for her was so impactful that I heard her as a wife, and so that's the tactics I had to do. And so the next time I said, okay, if I'm in the situation again, what do I need to do tactfully? Like, what's the tactic? And so I knew that if I put the fork down and held my hands and looked at her in the eyes, then I wouldn't be eating, and I would give her my full attention, and that would be the trigger for me. That would be the habit, the anchor habit for me to pay attention to what she was saying and actually hear her heart. Yeah. And so I remember, like, a few weeks after that, another serious conversation came up, and we were eating dinner at the house, and I put my fork down, like, held my hands, and I missed the first part what she was saying, but I got the second part, and I was able to talk to her, and it was like, okay, this art method works.
Yeah. Comes with repetition and practice.
Repetition, yes. And I had a conversation today where I almost spoke over him, and I said, oh, wait, the tactic kicked in and said, oh, wait, no, let me hold my hands, let me listen. Yeah. And like that is why I really love this method, and that's why it's powerful for me, because hell, it helped my wife and I be closer, which I don't know what's more important than that.
Exactly. So let's go over that art again for listeners. It's aware, reflect, and then I have a couple different T's jotted down my notes. Let's turn it over to you from that point.
It's aware, reflect, target, and try. I sort of put tactics in there as well, and then try is like find a situation again to test out this again. So go find a situation where you can apply stress to the meeting, and then see how you performed again. It's just like watching film in sports.
Right, that's a good analogy.
As an ex-athlete, for me, I would watch my swing, and I would know what pitches I would ground out, and what curveballs and what counts I would swing at. And so I was like, it dawned on me, like, why am I not doing this in my life? Like, that's really important to me now. That is my career. That is my sport now. Why would I not watch film of myself? Yeah. And so that's sort of how I approach it.
That's awesome. Good insight. So a lot of being self-aware is, to your point, and what we were talking about a few minutes ago, is this idea of repetition, and maybe at the end of the day, viewers could or listeners could jot down their big events that happened that day, or big conversations that happened today, and kind of replay them, just as some type of trigger that would help them to start this habit. Is that good advice? Or how would what be a good kind of trigger device that somebody could use to start implementing this into their day and help them practice? Like, oh well, in that conversation, I acted this way.
Yeah. So creating the discipline's hard. Mm-hmm. Creating discipline for new habits are hard in general. Oh yeah. And so for me, as I began that, it was really hard, and it was like a burden for me to reflect and dig inside, because I'm so futuristic. I'm so I'm so thinking about the future and so positive in the future. It was hard for me to go inland and look back, and so I had to create the daily disciplines to do it. And for me, I use the Darren Hardy journal. I know you're aware of that, Eric. Yep. And so I use the Darren Hardy journal, and one of it is to, like, every day to do this method, and I could check it off and make it a habit. Yeah. And so that's one tactic to do it. And so basically the answer is, like, just find a way to do it. Mm-hmm. Create the daily habit. I've been studying, like, how you anchor habits. So if after you brush your teeth, is there something that you want to do that you don't right now? Well, do it right after you brush your teeth, because you always brush your teeth. So that'll be the anchor habit. Like, you always brush your teeth. So after that, what do you do?
Yeah, that's huge.
Or if you want to like do more abs, okay, before you get in the shower every day, do abs.
Yeah.
So the shower is the anchor, and so you could do it that way. And so for people listening, if they're having a struggle with the daily disciplines and don't have a process, like, try to do it to something that you're always aware of. So when you brush your teeth, that 2 minutes you brush your teeth before bed, like, do this.
Yeah.
And that could be that would be the time you could do it, and that should be your anchor of kind of like, okay, this is the trigger I need to do this in.
Definitely, I like that terminology. Anchor for creation of habit.
Yeah, and it's developed by a guy out of Stanford, one of the professors out of Stanford, and I apologize, I don't remember his name, but he sort of, this tiny habits thing, he's sort of done a lot of research on this, and I really like his theories and his research on it.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I skimmed right over it, and I would be remiss, or I'd kick myself later if I didn't ask. So we've been talking about StrenghtFinders. Would you mind sharing your top 5 strengths just for fun?
Yeah. So activator, significance, self-assurance, focus, and achiever.
Very nice.
So what that means is that I have a lot of confidence, and sometimes I think I'm right, and I can get tasks done. The activator part of me wants to get people started. And so how I utilize my strengths is I want to activate people. I want to get them started. I want to have them create the change.
Yeah. Okay.
And I come off confident on the way I communicate because of my self-assurance. And so I have to be careful on that one, because sometimes I can come off too confident and I'm actually seeking direction and questions, but the person receiving that message from me is not hearing that.
Right.
Because my self-assurance, the way I'm communicating is the wrong way to communicate it. So I have to be careful on that one a little bit.
Yeah. You get a good point there. And I remember this from going over you. We might be stepping into more of the leadership realm, but maybe not. But anyways, the StrengthFinders has the balconies and basements, right? And that's kind of what you just touched on there a little bit, kind of gave a glimpse into it. Is, yes, these are strengths, but at the same time, there hits a certain point to where it's almost a deterrence or something you have to watch out for in your relationships as well.
Yeah, and it's, so you have natural talents. You're giving these natural talents. They could be used as strengths, or they could be used as, like, you could be in your basement, which is basically you're not utilizing your strengths. Yeah. And so, like, me not getting wisdom from smart guys because I'm trying to be too confident, or I'm coming off too confident, like, that's just a waste of that opportunity. So me being aware of it and knowing that, I will adjust the questions I ask. I'll be way more upfront about what I'm trying to seek out from the conversation, which is, hey, I want to get wisdom from you here. Yeah. So that opens the door to allow them to talk into what I'm saying and interrupt me if they need to. So being aware of that helps me communicate better with the person I'm sitting across from, because I know my strengths better. Definitely.
It all connects for sure. We just touched on, building habits into your routine to become more self-aware. So let's talk a little bit about what your daily routine looks like.
Oh boy. Okay. So I have made my wife a morning person. Nice. Just because my alarm goes off. So I get up around 5:30. I do prayer time, and then depends on what day of the week it is, I'll go work out. I'll study. I'll journal. That's basically my Monday through Friday, and I love having coffee with people. So if anybody listening wants to have coffee, I'm always about it. I love learning about people and helping people. So that's my morning routine. Very nice. Every day usually, and in there sometimes is, when I say study, it's go over book notes. It's study guys like the Tiny Habits, the professor who developed that, like studying that material and letting it sink in and see how I can utilize it. For sure. And it's also just reading. Spending an hour in the morning just to read and sit in quiet with coffee and read is one of my favorite things to do. Yeah, got to continue the education, right? Oh, yeah. Be a lifelong learner. All right, so we're getting towards the end here. Ryan, if you don't mind, you shared some big news with me, and that is that you're taking a new position and moving on from Idle Smart. Is that something that you care to touch on as far as, your aspirations and where you want to go? When we raised our Series A round, they approached me about being the COO, and you sort of get the salary and you get the benefits and you get the huge stock options. And I remember sitting there not being excited. And I realized that if I signed up for that 3 to 5 year window, I would just be doing it for the money. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of anti everything I stand for. Yeah. And so that moment, it was back in August, and this is January, I realized that my time with Idle Smart is done. And so then I sort of just approach it the right way and let the people who need to know that I was leaving, and then started to look at what that is next, and it'll be full-time leadership development and coaching, and really just the heart of leading, developing, encouraging people. Like, I would get to live out my why.
Yeah.
And I get to make a living out my why,
Yeah.
which is really, really cool. And it also is something that I truly believe in. And so, of course, I should start with myself first.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and self-awareness, I mean, to your point and the story you just told, you can apply that over a 5-year span, 10-year span, pretty much your whole life. If, down the road, you're more than likely going to be within the same ballpark of your same strengths. And so if you choose something to go down, choose a path to go down that's obviously not in your strengths or with your morals and values, you're probably not going to be happy when you get there.
Yeah, you won't be. And the question that you have to ask yourself is, for how long and to what extent?
Mm-hmm.
If you're a single parent and you got kids to put on the table and you don't like your job, but it pays really well, for how long and to what extent are my kids okay without me having this high income, right?
Right.
And so for me, when I asked that question, for how long and to what extent, and it was like a 3 to 5 year in that window, and knowing what it would take away from what I really love to do, it was clear what the decision should be.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I want this show to be a resource for both listeners and for you. So as you step into this new journey and looking for either businesses to go in and coach executives, or maybe just individuals that you want to help become better versions of themselves, what's the best way to contact you? Is that something to be open to?
Yeah,
Like
just call me on my cell phone or shoot
Okay.
me a text.
Cool.
I can give you the number if you want.
Sure, yeah.
816-898-3331. So,
Awesome.
yeah, I'd love to talk to you guys. I just love this stuff.
Nobody prank call Ryan, please, and act like you're a pizza place or something like that. We don't need that. No, I'm just kidding. Ryan, I appreciate you taking the time to tell us a little bit about your experience with StrenghtFinders and how you've applied it to your life, and really how self-awareness in general has played a key role in your life. That wraps up today's episode. I want to thank you all again for listening. My name is Eric Huey, and my goal is to provide you with inspiring content that helps you do your job better or go after your big goals. I'd appreciate your feedback with a rating or review on whichever platform you found the show. And if you'd like to share your feedback directly, or if you know someone who would be a great guest on the show, feel free to email me directly at GenWhyLeaders@gmail.com. That's GenWhyLeaders@gmail.com. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.